The main thing music serves in a video is mood enhancement. I was always very busy with the emotional aspect of the music I was working on, but I never just listened to a song and tried to understand what mood it creates, right?
Welcome to AI Music Unmuted. Real Talk by realmusic.ai. The show that talks to experts and thought leaders about tools and truths for musicians in the age of technology and creativity.
Today's guest is Ori Winokur, musician, producer, engineer, music industry veteran, and head of music at Artlist. Ori, welcome to the Real Music Podcast.
Thank you so much, David. Happy to be here.
So you have an extensive background. What has your journey been like, and what are the threads that brought you to where you are today?
Wow, so I had a very interesting journey in music and in life so far, I guess. I was very fortunate to kind of have a chance to work at almost every angle of the music industry in the past almost 30 years I've been doing this. I started as a kid by playing instruments, of course. I played the saxophone, ended up playing mainly the bass, but I play a little bit of almost every instrument. But as a kid, I was always really, really interested or very curious about records and studios and how records are made. I remember that from like a very early on stage in my life. I was always so curious to know how music is being recorded or how the magic of the studio happens. So I always was also very, very interested in that. I think when I was 13, my aunt from London bought me a four track tape machine. That's how old I am, if you want to understand the reference.
Right there
And
with
I
you,
actually,
buddy.
yeah, and I started recording at home when I was 13. I think that's actually why I also bought the bass guitar, because I wanted to have bass on the songs I tried to record. It ended up being my main instrument, but I think that was like my first real experience with recording music, and I spent a lot of time doing that already at the age of 13. And I think from there on, my journey was, I mean, I had a band, I played and I toured a lot throughout the world with my band Kululush. And I also started working as an engineer in a place that had both a studio, a live venue, and a rehearsal space. So I was kind of immersed with music from all different kinds of sides of the profession. And also for my band, I kind of acted as the manager, or because we were independent, so I kind of learned the business side from the ground up on that side of things. And then after many years of doing both, like being an active touring musician and a sound engineer, both for recordings and for live shows, I kind of understood that, my set of skills could be brought together to become a producer. And I ended up producing the first record I ever produced was one of the most successful artists to ever emerge out of Israel. I'm originally from Israel. And we recorded a record that ended up getting signed to Sony Columbia, which was kind of sensational for an Israeli artist. It's something that never happened before. That kind of jump-started my production career. I became a sought-after record producer in Israel, produced, I don't know, hundreds of songs. I never could count it. Ended up building my own studio. So I was also a studio manager. And I think this was like maybe now 10 to 15 years ago. And it was exactly the moment where the recording industry went through the deepest slope, like it's before Spotify, came to life. So it was like the end of selling physical records. I think there's a graph that shows it was the lowest moment for recorded music revenue. So I think it was a very interesting time for me because I kind of saw both sides. I was still young enough to see like the analog stage, and like how records were still being sold and making millions. But then I saw the drop, and then I saw how independent artists are kind of stuck. They can make great music all of a sudden. They have all the capabilities to create music on their own at home, or much cheaper than what it used to be to go and record a proper record. But then they were stuck in terms of how do I get discovered? How do I get promoted? How do I get to a new audience and all that? So I also kind of naturally started being more of an A&R. The more and more I produced, I realized I'm becoming more of an A&R, not just a producer, and maybe a manager in A&R position more and more for the artists I collaborated with. And in parallel to that, so I had my studio, I worked with a lot of artists, and I also started really, digging into the music tech world. I was part of a startup called Musico that we built like an online DAW like 8 years ago. We actually had a design patent for like a circle timeline DAW, which you could see, where you could see the whole timeline in one shot, like without zooming in and out. We actually, so I worked a lot like in product development and tech all of a sudden, which was very interesting for me. And this was also the same time that Artlist approached me. This is 8 years ago. So I was kind of buried in the studio, booked for many records, and also kind of started thinking of maybe launching my own record label, because I saw the need for artists to have like a surface or an infrastructure to work from. But then Artlist approached me. It was a very early stage of the company. Artlist was formed about 8 years ago with a very simple idea back then of just helping content creators license music for their videos. This was, again, very early stage of content creators or creator economy, which today, of course, is a huge thing. I keep saying this is before TikTok was part of our lives. Like, it was a whole different, it's only 8 years ago, but it's a whole different era. Artlist was established when it was actually the first platform in the world to offer subscription-based music licensing for video. So they started off with a very simple idea and a small catalog of about 300 songs that were produced by two of our founders. And it just took off like crazy. They just released this simple platform with 300 songs and a one yearly subscription plan, $200 a year. You can use any song in the catalog for video. It was like this very simple, naive idea. One of our co-founders, Ira, he keeps saying, I just built something I needed. He was a video creator and he got stuck with all these claims on YouTube. And he said, why don't we just have a service that I can just use whatever I find and want to use from my video? Why is it so complicated to license music? So I think it's a great story, by the way, because Artlist was formed on solving a very basic problem with a very simple solution at the end of the day. And then it grew, and today it became something very, very large and extensive. But it started just from that. And the crazy story was they were profitable week 2 on air. This is before I joined the company, because the idea was so great. They just marketed it like word to mouth through video creator blogs and stuff like that. And this generation of new emerging content creators, they loved they loved this deal. They loved the idea of just subscribing once, using any song in the catalog. And so they were profitable week 2 on air. And I think that's more or less when they called me up and they were like, Ori, we have all these incoming users. We need music. And honestly, it was so early days. I remember at the beginning, I didn't fully understand what they want me even to do. I just understood they approached me. It's an interesting idea. I ended up joining the company as head of what became Artlist originally. And basically the mission was for me to build a music production unit for the company and produce content for this catalog for content creators. So this was first very interesting for me because I had a chance to deep dive into the creator economy or the content creator world, which was, again, very new. And I discovered this is like a whole new form of art and a whole new discovery platform for content, because these are all independent creators. I remember I felt like I've been watching the independent musician sector growing, and all of a sudden I understood there's something on the other side who are independent video creators. And I understood that Artlist has this unique bridge between the two, which I can take opportunity for. And then my first thing was, how can I build what I like to call a creative infrastructure? Like, how can we produce content that would be great for this catalog? And I think it's very different than what used to be considered sync, because it's a different kind of usage and different kind of users or end clients, right? These are all mostly independent creators, global. Each one comes from a different background, different needs. And I think one of the things that excited me the most was I saw it's not like making background or, what you would call sync-oriented music. It was just about making great music for these creators. And I saw it as a very cool opportunity also because I was always very eclectic in my musical taste. I was never like a one-style producer or listener. I always liked everything. I just like good music in general. And also had a chance to work in various styles of music and produce anything from classical to jazz to rock to hip hop. Like, I kind of had the opportunity and experience to handle all kinds of music in my career. So I think that's also why this was a great fit for me to join Artlist and understand how I can make all these different kinds of music for these creators, for our users.
Had you thought about video before this and really, I don't want to say paid a lot of attention to, but did you really have a keen ear for music in video? Because it's a different element.
No, I feel like when I was producing and I had like a really like busy producer career, and I was stuck in my basement studio mostly all day, and I think when you're so focused on making music, you some for me it was like I felt like I came out to the light, and like I saw a whole new world and I learned what video creators are into and what they like and what music serves in a video. So for me, it was really when I joined Artlist was really the first time I really, really, took the time to deep dive into it and understand. And it was also a new way of using music in video because it wasn't like the TV and film or advertisement world, which was more part of the traditional sync world until 10 to 12 years ago, So it was very, very interesting for me. And I, of course, understood that music has such an important role in video making. And it was also very interesting culturally wise, because again, there's users from all over the world and each one of them wants something else. And it's like a very, very interesting thing to deep dive into. And it was actually very inspiring for me. And I think one of the things I learned from Eyal, he's one of the founders of Artlist, is that the main thing music serves in a video is mood enhancement. And as a music producer for many years, I never thought, I mean, I was always very busy with the emotional aspect of the music I was working on, but I never just listened to a song and tried to understand what mood it creates, right? So that was just as one example, of course. A very interesting new thing I learned when I joined Artlist was like, if you play a song, at the end of the day, definitely when you use it for a video, it mainly adds a mood into it, right? Like it can uplift the video, it can make some footage look sadder, and it's really interesting. You can try it yourself and just, play a video on YouTube on mute and replace the songs in the background. It could totally flip the way you feel about what you see, right? So I think that was again, just one example of something I really learned, and starting to look at that side of music making, which by the way I see as a great skill that I have today. I can listen to a song and understand the mood today maybe in 10 seconds of listening to a snippet. I can know very, very immediate feel of what the mood and emotion is, or how can it contribute to a video. So it's definitely a skill I developed working at Artlist. But just to give you maybe the end of the story, or to take us to where we are today. So when I joined, again, it was still very small. We were a small company. I think it was employee number 27 or something like that, if I remember correct. One of the first employees in music. So I started building this creative infrastructure. And by the way, what we did was we took what we could see on the platform, which was the way the music was tagged and curated for our users, and try to understand from our user behavior what they're looking for. So of course they like hip hop and cinematic uplifting music more than anything else, because that's like your classic go-to. But then we also found all these niches of things that they were looking for on a more specific search. So we started building this method where we would take the data that we saw on Artlist, combine it with some trending things we see outside, like music on YouTube on big channels, what's trending on Spotify and charts and so on. And we started to build this method of how can we, make data conscious decisions on what kind of music to create and how to create it. So that was the very first thing I did. But then something very interesting happened, and I always love telling this story because I think it's very unique. One of the first records I produced for the catalog was for a very talented piano player named Yechezkel Raz. He was a pretty anonymous artist from Israel back then. He had like 200 monthly listeners on Spotify, released 2 albums independently. And we created a beautiful piano solo record for Artlist. We posted it on Artlist. This was maybe my third month working for the company. And 2 days later, he woke up in the morning and he had like 30 messages on his Facebook of people saying, "We heard your piano on Ryan Reynolds' video." So turns out people saw it on a video that Ryan Reynolds posted that had 15 million views in one day.
That's a big
And
jump.
I looked at the video and I'm like, he didn't even credit neither Artlist or the artist for the music, but still 30 people somehow found this still very anonymous artist and reached out because they loved the music, right? So it turns out I saw people were commenting on the video asking where's the beautiful music from, and somebody found it. I don't even know how, and it kind of snowballed. And then I remember, I think he told me, the piano player Yechezkel, he told me, I never released music that got to 15 million pair of ears in one day. And I think for me, that was like an aha moment, because I said, like, I had this vague idea that maybe I should build a label inside Artlist because we have all these creators. But once that happened, I was like, this is the new discovery platform for music that everybody were waiting for, because again, I saw the decline of the recorded music industry. And I immediately saw this as an incredible opportunity, because I saw we're getting all these big influencers that are using Artlist on a daily basis. And I said, if we had Shazam in the middle, right? So like our users would download music from Artlist, they would use it in videos that ends up getting millions of views, billions of views combined. And if even 1% of those would Shazam, they would go back to Spotify. So I said, this is the reason why we have to build a distribution pipeline. So I ended up back then, I mean, it was a very interesting year for me, because I think I achieved more in that year than most of my decade, in a way, because I saw a very clear idea and mission at that point, and an opportunity that I wanted to seize, So I somehow managed to build or to redo our artist agreement so it would include publishing properly and distribution rights and like all that, and like the label side of things. I initiated building an API so we can distribute everything to all the DSPs. And we started distributing everything we do, or all the music we make for Artlist Original. And we immediately started seeing this organic streaming traffic, which was very interesting. And while I was doing this, the company was actually developing more and more tools for our users and catalogs for our users. And I was kind of busy building this music company inside this creator tech company. So the company then evolved into having a sound effects catalog, a footage catalog, tools and templates, plugins. Today, we're all the way out to AI generative tools, which we'll talk about in a second, probably. So I think the company was building more and more towards being a one-stop shop for creators, and I was developing the music, which is still till today our main product, which creators love and come to use, mainly Artlist music before anything else. But I was also building this entire music infrastructure in the background. And long story short, this same piano player that had 200 monthly listeners became the most streamed Israeli artist in the world last year. He peaked with 5 million monthly listeners last year. And that same song, Ballerina, that was used on Ryan Reynolds' video, has about 400 million streams across DSPs today. And this is all organic. So this is a very unique discovery mechanism. We call it the Artlist effect. So that's what happens to music when it's placed on Artlist. Because we're still very curated, we have about 30,000 songs on Artlist today, which is less than what Spotify releases in a day, right? Or what's posted on or released on Spotify on a day. So it's still very curated. We have half a million active users using the music daily on their videos. So it's like I call it like the octopus. It's like an octopus of distribution that gets to many, many ears. And of course, we're very proud of it. And our original music grew tremendously since then. And we're producing about 2,000 songs a year. That's our scope of work with artists from all over the world. Yeah, and last year, exactly a year ago, I relocated to LA to be closer to the artist community here and scout and fresh talent on the ground, which I'm very happy to do. And Artlist keeps expanding. And as I started saying, today we're actually building AI tools for creators and launching every few months. We're launching new tool sets, and it's going great. And it's a very interesting journey for me, emerging from the studio to building something like that. And also had a very interesting managerial journey inside the company, because I started almost all on my own. I had one assistant, and grew to have at the peak of it, I had 70 employees under my wing at the music department. So a lot of very interesting experiences along this journey.
Term I've been hearing a lot lately is hyperimagination. Do you think AI is going to spark new genres? I mean, have you heard this term? What does it mean to you?
I think I might have coined it. I used it now when I thought about trends for next year. So I think, with all the fear that AI brings in, which is, I think, very natural, I mean, it's so close to, you look at what it's capable of doing, even in music today, which is relatively new. The point it got to is relatively new, but you can listen to it and say, wow, this can just replace things that we used to work on 6 months in the studio, maybe 10 different people to get to that kind of result. And of course, that's the kind of scary part about it. But I started thinking, where's the opportunity? Like maybe my story can show you I'm always looking for the opportunity in everything. I think it's a very important part of life, to find the opportunity in everything you see. And I think, and you already see this emerging, I believe. I think what AI brings to the table is the opportunity to hyper imagine things. I mean, you can produce, and it's same with visual, by the way. With visuals, you can really see it already. All of a sudden, you can make these things that used to be only in our dreams, right? Like, for example, Artlist just released an ad where you have a train that becomes an airplane and starts flying in the air, or there's a caterpillar that can talk and stuff like that, which you could never really film. It wasn't something you can do. And I think the interesting part about it, it brings everything back to the source of, do I have a great idea? Because you can kind of do anything all of a sudden. And I think when it comes to music, it's actually a little harder to imagine compared to footage, because with footage you can have this crazy image in your mind and then try to describe it, right? With music, there's all this culture of genres and styles and of the music history. And I think what would start, and you see it starting to happen. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out Suno and what's happening there, where a lot of people generate music. But I already discovered a few new genres there. One of them is something called chaos score,
All
which
right.
is this kind of music that every 2 or 4 bars completely change genres. Like it could go from a violin solo to a country loop, to a dubstep beat, to an orchestral arrangement, and this would just be 4 bars each. I mean, so, and this is very interesting because I actually played a few of these that made sense to my ears, and I could even enjoy it as a listener in a weird way.
So you found it to be cohesive?
In a way, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think everything is still very early stage, but I also see a lot of people combining all these genres there in a way that you could never do. And I think, when it comes to music, again, it's a little harder to think what could be hyper imagination in music, right? But it could be, in my opinion, combining genres that could never be merged together, or not naturally merged together. It could be producing specific parts for a song that used to be very, very hard to produce. For example, I try to generate a gothic choir that sings a pop chorus, for example, right? That was something that maybe was done once or twice in history where they could actually get a gothic choir to record something. So I think those kind of ideas are what I would call hyper imagination in music. And I think it's still very early stage of that. And we're going to see more and more very interesting ideas. And I won't be surprised if I'll be surprised. Let's put it that way. But I see it as the creative opportunity when it comes to what AI does in music or in content in general. And I think in many ways, it brings everything back to the concept. You need to have very good ideas, more than anything else, because one thing that AI does already in many, many fields, it kind of lowers the bar of what's accessible for anybody to create. But while it's lowering the bar, the bar of people making content is growing higher because there's so much more content, right? And the way I see it a little bit is like what used to be called top or middle tier content would become low because everybody could do that. And the only thing that would actually stand out is what's above that bar, which would be an amazing, amazing idea and amazing execution, which, by the way, is still very hard with AI, even though it's like incredible tool. It's like it's not easy to create something mind-blowing with AI. You need to spend a lot of time, and also, by the way, still a lot of money, because generative content costs money. It's not for free.
Yeah. I mean, creativity still takes good ideas, right? And you can only expand on those using tools like AI. So another level I see is AI can not just shift genres, like you said, and have it cohesively all go together, but, evolving in real time, living media, if you will. Are
Yeah,
you seeing this develop?
I think this is what I would refer to in music, at least, as adaptive music or adaptive sound. Probably same could be reflected on visuals, but if we talk about music, I think you're already seeing some music startups that are starting to do it, especially in gaming. I saw a few very interesting startups that already built this kind of adaptive music engine for game developers, for example, that could take a song, separate it into stems, and segment the actual music parts of a song. I call it like the X and Y scale for the song. You would have the different tracks and the different parts of the arrangement, and it would auto adapt the song you chose to what's happening in the game. And I think that's one example of a use case. I think AI would bring opportunities to create adaptive music for many different use cases. It could be like, I love this artist, but I want it to be adaptive to what's happening during my day. So I want to play John Lennon, but I want it to be adaptive to my focus time when I work, and to my workout time when I work out, and to my sleep when I go to sleep. So this is, for example, and I think there's a few also examples of that, of like generated soundscapes and stuff like that. I think what we would see is a lot more fluid, adaptive music situations, just like the game developer thing. And I think it's a very interesting opportunity also for artists, by the way, because you can make adaptive music would make the listener on the other side much more engaged. It's not just like passive listening, it's more like he's part of the experience. So I think that's a very interesting thing that we start seeing emerging.
Is maybe a part of this that the deeper impact for AI is, say, modification, where AI can, like, it can iterate on other inputs, but even iterate on itself?
Yeah, so I think actually, one thing that I like to think about, or really helps me with understanding AI, and of course, AI is becoming something that's hard beyond our intelligence to even understand, right? So I just try to frame it in ways which are easier for me to understand. So again, when it comes to content, I'm not even trying to talk about large language models or medical AI or whatever, because it affects everything today already. But I think when it comes to content, you can kind of separate it to two types. There's fully generative AI, meaning you would create something out of nothing, and there's modificational tools. And I think we're currently in a place where generative has a very strong hype, like, because this is like a wonder, right? The world never saw anything like it. I can type a few words and I would get a song, or I would get a picture, or I would get a video. So it's actually very cool and very interesting at this point. But I think what we will start seeing is more and more modificational use cases coming in, which, by the way, might even be modificational on top of generative content. I mean, because in a way, when you generate something, it's like there's no real process there, so you can have a great concept, but there's no process. And most of the pain people feel when working with generative tools is like, it would get some of what I wanted, but I still want to modify it, right? So I think that would, and so that's for generative content. But of course, also modifying existing works of art is a very interesting thing. I mean, think about Picasso's work coming to life as a full feature video. I just thought about it now, by the way, but that's a very interesting idea, right? So if you could modify that art form into a new art form, that's a very interesting use case. And I would see the same with music. Like, what if I take um, a classic song by The Doors and I allow their users to modify it and make remixes, even though they don't know how to produce music, right? That's a very interesting engagement tool. And of course, so that's on the consumer side, but of course, on the actual creator side, I think modificational tools will just become more and more part of the working process. We definitely see it already, like Photoshop for visual editors is fully integrated with AI. Adobe Premiere for video, same. We see a lot in music. We see a lot more plugins that are AI based, a lot of sample platforms that are AI based and everything like that. So I think, AI will be more and more integrated into the actual creative process. And that's where it will also become much more interesting. So I have a feeling generative would become less of a hyped thing and just part of the opportunity of how to create with AI.
Yeah, I think one use case that everyone can agree on for generative AI or fully generative AI is sampling, right?
Mhm.
There's some real opportunities to kind of create your own samples, if you will, if that even makes sense.
Yeah, there's I think Arcade already released, I think it's called Co-Producer, and Waves released a plugin that creates samples generated. And I think what you see, which is really interesting, is reactive modificational tools. Um, I, I think there's a company called IoT that would plug into your session, understand what you have, and would add another track. Like, I want to add a guitar, so it would already understand what I'm working on and would generate a guitar that musically fits what I'm doing, both rhythmically, harmonically, and so on. this is very interesting, right? Because it's like it's a new way to create or or ramp up a song. And in a way, it's a big shortcut, but I think people will always want to create. At the end of the day, when you generate something in a second, it's not really satisfying. Maybe 1 in 10 would be satisfying because it would blow your mind, but it becomes boring, So it has to still have some sort of a process in it. So yeah, I see more future or more interesting developments in modificational tools more than generative tools. And I think generative tools would definitely still grow, of course, and will be very much influential in the more consumer base. Anybody can create something. So I want to make a song for my son's birthday. That's great. I can generate it, right? That's like a cool gimmick or something nice to do. But
Fun
when it
novelty.
comes, yeah, novelty. But when it comes to actual creative work, I think you will see a generation, you already see a generation of artists that create mind blowing, never seen or heard before things that are using it as some of their process, not fully as their process.
Yeah, our friend Blue from IoT, he was on and he was mentioning that one of the great benefits of AI is that it can allow you to do more of the creative work that you want to do.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of artists pulling together, careers and incomes, having to do a lot of work that they don't want to do.
yeah.
So AI really has a benefit there.
Yeah, and I would build on that and say I think there's another very interesting side that I think AI can really, really help creative people automate a lot of, I would say, what's around their creative work, right? Like if it's distribution or management or monetization or crowd building and fan base management. I think the more friction AI can reduce from that side of things, because today being a creative is being a DIY business, right? DIY, sorry, then anything that AI can automate on the more, I would say, logistical operational side means people will have more time to create, right? And also, like Blue said, which is it's something I totally agree with, many times you have this great idea and you're just stuck. And I think this would stop. Like you can try out everything so fast, it means you will get to new results much faster. So the creative bar rises again because of that.
Hyper creative.
Hyper creative and hyper imagination. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are missing out on really the full value of AI. We talk a lot about it helping with the creative process, but we've also touched on the workflow, licensing, so many other aspects, even marketing. What's the real value here, the full ecosystem of what AI can do? Beyond all the hype and the AIs coming for us all, the benefits are just massive from idea all the way through. I hate to call it execution because we're talking about creative here, but really the whole process. We could probably list 20 plus things that AI is really helping with.
Absolutely. And again, it's just the beginning of it. I mean, I can imagine a world where in a year from now, every artist can build their own app, can build their own virtual world, like can make things happen so fast. And then on the more operational side, they can have an agent that knows their brand, knows how to market, knows how to build their follower, to grow their followers on Instagram for them and do all these, neat and greedy work that every creator needs to do today. So it's really across the board. When it comes to licensing, I think Artlist is already a good example of how you can simplify the process and make it much more accessible, and grow a market. The creator or the UGC based licensing world grew tremendously in the past 5 years, and AI is just going to make it faster. All of a sudden it's easier to find the music you want, it's easier to license it. Now it's probably going to be integrated with generated music as well. So I think that's, it's like an endless list of where it could actually assist and change things. And I'm very curious to see what the result would be. I think one thing I thought about it a few days ago, like if you think about it, we used to consume content that was only made by very big companies, right? Like 15 years ago, before the creator economy. So almost everything you would hear on the radio, on watch on TV, or the cinemas would be made by either Sony, Warner, or Universal, right? More or less, you could say that. I keep saying it's like three companies that control entertainment, right? For both visual and audible content. And the creator economy made something very interesting, I think, because in a way, it democratized. Everybody can make content off their phone. And all of a sudden you have Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a brand on its own. It's something that maybe would never get placed on TV or film like 10 years ago, right? But he has his own style of entertainment, and he built and one of the most successful brands in the world. And I'm saying just as an example, because there's all these little influencers or micro content creators that have their niche audience, their niche style, and it works. And I think it's very interesting because it democratizes the way content is made, and then it also democratizes the way it's consumed. And I think AI will kind of take it even a step further, because it's a very similar, if you think about it, it's a very similar direction of the evolution. Like content used to be, kept for the majors, and you needed a lot of budgets, and so they would decide what we see and how we see it or how we hear it. And then again, the more it was, approachable to create, it was also more approachable to consume. And I think what we're going to see is the rise of all these new little niches. I mean, there might be a new art form where an artist creates, again, I kind of see it as a whole world, more than one singular art form. And we already see it in new artists in music for the past decade already. I think, like, if you look at someone like Billie Eilish, she comes with like a full scope of sound, style, vision, video. It's like a whole story. It's not just I can write a great song and record it. It's much beyond that in her mind, and also in the way she's being consumed. So I think AI will just take it to the next step of that. And I actually think there's going to be a lot more smaller niche worlds or styles or artists that have their niche, and also a few big success stories for the things that would become super popular, just like Mr. Beast became this super popular thing nobody would bet on 10 years ago, right? Like nobody would believe this kid would become so big. So I think we're definitely going to see that with AI as well, and probably more of it, again, because everything is like hyper speed. You can make everything you imagine so much faster, so it would probably impact on that aspect as well.
Yeah, we're moving at a rate where a year is almost a decade. And, I'm in my 50s. I go back to analog. I went through, the digital transformation, sampling, streaming, all these things. And now
Yeah.
AI. I have a 17-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. And so they're 6 years apart, which is a pretty good age gap for two siblings. But they are going through entirely different worlds, especially as we talk about music and video and content. At only 6 years apart, they might as well be 2 decades apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something like sampling, and I think I thought about it a few days ago too, that in a way, music always evolved from sampling, if you wish, previously existing genres, right? Like rock and
Jazz.
roll was built on R&B. R&B was built on blues, and I think, and then when it was combined with jazz and classical, you got all the new age music coming in. And then hip hop was built on sampling drum loops from funk records or rock records, and then somebody singing on top. So it's always this kind of resampling of culture that ends up creating a new style or a new genre. And by the way, I think hip hop was probably the last time it happened so far, right? And in a way, AI brings, or actually generative AI in that aspect, or we know what both modification and generative AI brings a very interesting opportunity, because I think different to how sampling used to work, right? Like older age, it was like I grew up on this style and now I can recompose it. Then it was I can actually take the recording of a rock record and transform it and even cut one shots and create a new beat with it. And all of a sudden you can just recreate something out of your imagination. Like you can say, I want a rock guitar combined with a trap beat and Arab strings and Indian singer, and it would resample a whole culture. It's not going to sample a specific thing. So I think I see this as, I mean, it's a nice way of approaching it, at least, like understanding that other than the fact that there's all these problems which we haven't discussed yet about legalities and attribution and the way it's being trained, which is very, very complicated. It's like a black hole. The interesting part about it is, again, the resampling and the cultural shift it could evolve into or bring into the table,
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of additional topics we could cover as far as all of the challenges that we have to solve. And I think we're talking a lot about that creative level and what you can really do with it and all that. I always like to, someone with your background and your experience and expertise, is there advice or what mistakes do you see creators making with music and video.
Creators using music in video or musicians?
So there's a lot of content creators who don't have a music background. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they still have to make choices. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see being made, and what are some quick improvements that they can really adapt?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Um, one thing that jumps to mind is sometimes they move too fast. Like they would just look for something and add it to their video and not give it enough thought. And again, I think music has such an important role in video. Even though a lot of people scroll in mute today, it's still a big, big part of what creators should do. Um, and I think, matching the right soundtrack is still a real art form, like finding the exact right song. And by the way, if you look at super trending videos on both TikTok or YouTube, the music choices will always be really, really good. So I would say don't oversee it. Don't think it's like, yeah, I can just license something off my subscription, or I can generate something off 11 Labs and have it just fit my video. It's going to be good enough. I think you have to understand that the audio has, when unmuted, at least, yeah, it has like 50% of the brain's attention when you see a video. So it's a very important part of the consumer's consumption. So I would say don't overlook it and understand how important it is, and understand that it could be both supplemental or enhancing your content and also contradicting your content, which is a very interesting. A lot of viral videos have some sort of a irony or contradiction between the soundtrack and the visual. So it would actually use the 50% to bring another angle to what you're experiencing. And I think that's still a big thing. And some creators, definitely younger ones, just oversee it or think it's just a thing, like I'll get a good track.
So how does this fit into, a lot of content is short form, right? I guess every second, every note is more important, you might argue.
And so I think it's about the hook. It's just like a great pop song. You're supposed to get it in 10 seconds. This is before the TikTok or Shorts generation. And, you can listen to Stevie Wonder and see the way he formed songs. It was always this super clever attention grabber, right? Like you would never get lost. You will always wait for the hook. So I think Shorts is exactly that. And when it comes to music, it's about finding the exact hook you can put, which would be right on it, and we produce music on Artlist specifically made for Shorts in mind. And I remember when I instructed my team to start doing it, because they were used to, maybe I'll give this as a background for a second. So we're producing a lot of music for content creators, but it's not like we're producing for a film or an ad. Like we don't see the footage, right? So I like saying we're producing music for a picture without seeing the picture. We never see the actual sync matching, so we have to imagine it. So we can work, let's say, let's make a track that would be perfect for a peaceful YouTube video showing nature landscapes. Okay, that would be one way of looking at it. When we started looking at Shorts, when it became so popular, I said, just think about it like you're scoring a short video. And I told them, take all the top trending shorts on TikTok, mute the video, and try to compose to it as if you're composing for this exact idea. And by the way, of course, one of the major things with shorts is humor. I think humor is a great attention grabber, right? And irony or humor, and a lot of attention to what a small lyric could do. Like one sentence compared to what you see could make the whole short a thing, right? Like, and you see, by the way, most trending music on Shorts has an interesting lyrical hook that connects to the story the person is trying to post or show. So we actually started looking at it like that, like producing for those short form films or videos, whatever you want to call it, right? Like memes, gags, whatever it is. And yeah, I think interestingly enough, a lot of humor or irony, or like, again, how you use the music to flip the scenario a little bit.
You're creating music without seeing the visual, like you just said. So did you have to start off by saying, okay, here are the first 10 categories that, we're going to create for, like you said, humor, you kind of created those. And then
I think categories is a too narrow way of thinking about it. So, because again, at the end of the day, if you have only one category, you don't know what to do yet, right? So we structured it as, let's try to be as precise as we can. So of course, the main easiest category for musicians to understand is genre. So I would make a cinematic track. Okay, but then what moods should it have? What kind of videos should it work for? Right? What kind of instrumentation is good for our users, what are they looking for. And then there's all the more even deeper emotional layer, right? Like, what's the dynamic curve, how does it evolve, does it start big and go small, does it start small and go big, does it have different parts where an editor. And then it's so specific per case, right? Because like you can work on a cinematic track that needs to build really slowly and start from being peaceful to being epic, which is a classic, of course, score. But for today's kind of advertisement and social posting, you actually want a hip hop instrumental that changes atmosphere almost every 10 seconds, or has like some sort of an interesting transition where an editor can actually build on top of the music. When we make these, by the way, we know a lot of editors start with the song. They would take the song and edit the commercial into the song on top of the song's timing. So there's so many things to consider. I mean, I don't want to give all the secrets of our trade, but we're actually analyzing and understanding a lot of things and trying to produce with a lot of insight. But I would always say, and I always tell my team too, data is cool, but data without intuition and professionalism doesn't work. So we also try to put it in perspective, and we mainly investigate and learn it so our intuition could be sharper when we're actually making music, right? So it's not like it's black and white, like we would have a chart of what we're supposed to do and we would just do that. So it's really about combining intuition and data insight into one production table.
So I always like to ask where people think the real human element still remains. And you just mentioned intuition and some things like that. I mean, that ChatGPT, I always describe it as the most intelligent intern you've ever had because it still
Yeah.
makes no mistakes.
Yeah.
I asked it the other day, I said, I'll type something in and it spits out an answer so fast. And I had a follow up to it. So I
Yeah.
asked it to not give me such quick answers. And so the next question I asked, it just said thinking. And it thought for 30 seconds before it gave me an answer. I'm like, no, that's not
Yeah.
what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
don't slow down your responses. Don't just fire away
I
without
heard
knowing what
something
I want.
really interesting yesterday on a different podcast I was listening to, and excuse me for not remembering the name, but somebody said, AI shouldn't be artificial intelligence; it should be amplified intelligence. And the reason I loved it is because, in a way, the crazy thing about AI, it's the first time in history, I think, that humanity built a tool that's smarter than humans. This never happened before, right? Like when the camera was invented, people know how a camera is built and how it works. We are today at a point where the most advanced models, if you would ask the best AI scientist or data scientist in the world how it operates, he wouldn't know how to tell you that because it's smarter than him. So this is like a new thing, right? So this is also why it's very scary, right? People say, what if it takes over us because it's smarter? But at the end of the day, as long as we frame it as a good tool, which we hopefully will, and it won't go to bad areas. And I have to say, I always say when we do content or music, it's not brain science and it's not medical and everything's okay. The worst thing that can happen is, like, I don't know, a flying dragon with a tattoo and purple fire around it. That's the worst thing that can happen, right? It's not like it's going to
Could be
affect
the best
people's
thing that
lives.
happened too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, I'm just trying to say it's lightweight compared to other industries where it could be impactful. And when it comes to military, for example, nobody knows where it can go. It can go into crazy places. But the reason I like amplified intelligence, because it's still in our hands to operate it, at least today. I don't know what the future brings. And if you can direct it, and this is exactly where intuition and concept becomes the most two important things. Because if you have a great concept and a good intuition, and you can use AI to amplify your intelligence, you would get a hyper result, right? If you don't have good concept and then you don't have good intuition, you won't use this amplification that well, and it would maybe do something very basic, right? Or very just enhance it a little bit. And I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, right? And just like you said, even on ChatGPT, I found my ways of building this structure to work with it and him help me better, right? So when I work inside those structures, I actually get so much better result, and it would actually take me forward. Sometimes things that used to take me months now take me a minute, right? And I think, again, if you do it right, it amplifies what you do and it puts you in a new spot or like the next step so much quicker that you're able to look at the next steps ahead. So it's really interesting. It could be a lot of fun. And again, I'll be honest and say, some days I wake up very excited, and some days I wake up scared. I'm saying, like, what if it replace everything eventually? Everybody has that question, right? And again, I think it is a different revolution. It's not like anything that we saw before because it is smarter than us eventually, right? And it holds all this data about everything, and it's so clever, and it has so many dots it can connect that we as a human being could never connect. And the pace of changes is so quick that sometimes it's just overwhelming. But at the end of the day, I think it's like tidal waves, like you get scared for a second, it overloads you a little bit, and then it flows back in. And I think in a year or two, I think first of all, people will stop saying AI, because it's just like people don't say, I have a chip in my phone, right? Like chips used to be a big thing, like when chips were invented or CPU units were invented, that was a big thing. But nobody tells you, hey, I have my CPU with me, right? It's not even a term that normal people use. So I think now AI is everywhere, and you see AI tagged I think it's probably the most said out word in the world at this point, right? Probably the word AI is being said millions of times a minute at this point. But in a few, probably year or two, at the pace of things, it will just become a commodity. Of course, everything is amplified, right? So it would probably also calm down, and people will also know better how to use it, how to integrate it. That being said, of course, there are parts of different occupations that might disappear because nobody needs to do that anymore, so.
Yeah, we have to go into this with our eyes open for sure. We know that ethics is a big topic now. Where are we going to be a year or two from now with AI and ethics?
Let's talk a little bit about where I think it is today. And I think music, by the way, is really, really the most interesting when it comes to AI and rights or copyrights. Because in a way, if you think about it, music is the only art form that has proper copyright management in place, right? Music has this history of managing copyrights properly, and it also has two avenues of copyright. It has the publishing IP side, and it has the sound recording side. In a way, and I said it to many people already in the past, it's the actual same infrastructure AI would need to manage copyrights, right? Because it trains on data and then creates new derivatives. It's exactly like a composer can compose a piece of music and then various people can record it, right? It's the exact same scenario where you have IP and you have derivative works of that IP. So that's one thing which I think is very interesting, and music could actually lead the way in that side of the AI revolution. And one other thing that you see, which is of course very interesting, is the fact that music has copyright infrastructure in place also changes the way AI generative music could be adapted compared to other art forms. So if you look at visuals, it's basically, the barrier has broke. I mean, AI trained on probably all visuals in the world, both video and stills. And today you can generate mind-blowing Hollywood grade videos and nobody gets paid for that, right? Nobody created the first original works that were trained or that AI was trained on. And that's lost forever because nobody's going to go back and try to understand. With music, we see something interesting. We see a company like Suno that trained on music illegally and people use it, but it's completely blocked from commercial use, right? So they're being sued by the majors. They have millions of users. A lot of people are using it, but you can't distribute that music. You can't commercially use it. Brands would never use it because it's as scary as using fire, right? Like they can get sued eventually. So you see how music creates, or music copyrights creates, a barrier that never happened so far with generative AI. So that's one thing that I think is very interesting. And then what actually happened mid-August, 11 Labs announced a deal with Cobalt and with Merlin. So Cobalt is the fourth biggest publisher in the world, and Merlin is like the fourth biggest record label in the world because they're like an authority that combines a lot of independent record labels. Now, a very interesting point to note, in my opinion. So the headline was that 11 Labs, which is a generative audio company, struck a deal with these two big independent music companies to legally license AI, music for AI training. The fact of the matter behind the announcement is that both Cobalt and Merlin had to, and still are trying to, opt in all the actual copyright owners who are musicians, artists, composers, writers, and they all have to opt in on both the publishing and recorded side of a song. So let's say a song has 3 writers and 1 performer and 1 master owner. They all need to agree for that song to go into the training model. And for me, I have to say, and this is a bit outrageous if you ask me, because the real headline wasn't supposed to be there's legal AI generative music. It was supposed to be, would artists opt in to let AI train on their models? And I can say I hear a lot of backlash on the background and a lot of artists that are not opting in. And the reason they are not opting in is not just because they're like scared of progress, because there is no proper attribution engine in place. And I can honestly tell you from firsthand that Cobalt is saying they won't have an attribution in place because this would be almost impossible to re-attribute. So they tried to figure out a revenue payout model, which I don't think many artists would be in favor of, which is basically just splitting the money equally. Half of it is going to be split equally between the amount of songs that were trained, and the second half is going to be paralleled with popularity data that they have on Cobalt, meaning the more popular songs would get paid out more. And in my opinion, there's going to have to be some sort of a next step. And again, with all the technology and all the improvements, this is definitely possible to at least be able to scan the generated output and understand who should get paid for that specific generated piece of audio. Because the way it's built today, if somebody generates a jazz track, it would pay out more money to the pop creators because pop is more popular. So this makes absolutely no sense, right? And music brings it to an interesting point again, because with visual, the barrier is broke. It's all out there. I can tell you, like, production companies don't produce footage anymore the way they did. It's all over. The game is done. With music, it's a different story because, again, I think some artists will definitely not opt in. Probably most of them will not opt in at this stage. And then it also means the quality of the data that would be available for training is not the highest, still not for legal use, right? And the attribution problem is so big, it's going to take a while to solve it, if any time it would be solved. And even if it would be solved in terms of recognizing what should be paid out, I think there's going to be a huge problem with the actual payouts. Like, we know how royalties work in music today when copyrights are much simpler. Like, a song is played on the radio, they need to pay 5 people. Most of the times, not all of them get paid properly, right? With all the PRO infrastructure and everything. So now we're looking at nano payments of what might be half a cent for a generated song somewhere that needs to end up at the Elvis estate. Who's going to make sure that happens? I have no idea. So I think there's still a lot of questions there, which would actually, it's good because that might actually slow it down to a more reasonable pace. I don't think it won't change. I mean, evolution only goes in one direction, which is up or forward, right?
Uh-huh.
But with music, it might go a little slower and more in control. That's what I'm hoping. I mean, but I won't be surprised if we'll hear of a big deal between either Suno or a bigger company like Google, striking a big deal with the majors and paying out, I don't know, a huge, large sum upfront to kind of get the music industry on board, and they would try to get this cat off the bag. Similar to how Napster started illegally and then Spotify found the legal way to solve it. We'll see something similar, but the challenges this time are like 10 times bigger in
Right.
so many aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ori, I appreciate all your insights and your time, and thanks so much for joining us. Where can our listeners learn more about Artlist?
So you can just log into artlist.io. Our platform is actually wide open for people to surf through and listen to the music. And you only need to subscribe if you want to actually use the content or license it. So yeah, you can just log into Artlist. You can follow us on socials. You can follow me on socials. Always happy to talk to other creative people and connect. So yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Everyone, check out realmusic.ai for more resources. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this content. And what do you say? Let's go make some music.
Absolutely. Let's make hyper imagined music.
You coined it. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.